Welcome back to For the Love of Humanity, Season 3, Episode 8. I hope you enjoyed the last episode. That one was like an open, vulnerable dive into my processing. And I have to admit, and this is possibly because my personal planets are in Aquarius in my 8th house, it feels a little bit vulnerable to share some of those things. Although I will say, in my teen years and 20 years and 20s, I felt like an open book, but I think I was more of an open book just to be rebellious, just to be like I don't know, shock value, not having any shame. Um, Boy, did I find that to be an interesting predicament when I started to do the work and realize there was some shame deeper in there. So, but yeah, I hope it was useful. I hope it was helpful. I hope it's now raining here. I have my door open. It's raining and it smells really nice. I hope it was a good episode for you. Um, Welcome back to Season 3 For the Love of Humanity, Episode 8. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. It was a little piece of vulnerable heaven for me. It was a little slice of vulnerability to let you into that aspect on a public forum such as this. I have a space for alchemy where I'm going to be unearthing daily scenarios, situations as they come up, topics for consideration to help you alchemize your everyday little tough nuts. And so that will be a group experience, not necessarily just open generally to the public. Although, if you're interested in joining, send me a quick message. I'm in the works of putting it together. And this was a little taster of what that would look like, sort of. This is a long version, but similar types of exploration and hand-holding through the process of everyday alchemy, looking at some deep-rooted feelings, having some support and acceptance and love, as well as some space holding for your ultimate potential, your highest potential, tips to reach those places comfortably and sometimes uncomfortably, but a place for you to feel into what it feels like to reach those levels of resilience, comfort, and to help you mine your gold, like a little Minecraft experience. So this week, I want to talk about justice, fairness, right relations. Because as I mentioned last week, relationships, justice in relationships, feeling just, feeling justified, feeling justice, these are all related, but sometimes swampy emotional experiences. So I want to talk about how I see them and I want to explore them with you a little bit. And when I talk about justice, I'm not talking about like gavel and judge justice. I'm more talking about the emotional feeling experience of right, of just, of ease, of just feeling a sense of justice, of feeling a sense of fairness and rightness, and how increasingly I'm coming to understand that that is something we feel inside. And it can be very frustrating to see the horrors going around outside of us and not feel like, I'm not saying you won't feel triggered because you will feel triggered, but not feeling like somehow it takes away from your internal sense of experience around justice. Now, I know some of you hearing that might feel like, pardon? No, 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 no. But I believe that we can feel feelings of safety, justice, like feelings of homecoming, feelings of groundedness, feelings of safety inside us. I feel like our body is our home. We're given all the technology and tools to create feelings. We might have in our head that when we hear about having absolute control, freedom, creativity, wherewithal, design, that it's going to mean that we like blink and there's something on the external that's exactly fits the thing that we've decided we want. Similar to wanting really badly to have unicorns manifest in the exact way you want them to manifest. And I get it because I am an idealist, and that's both my gift and has to be my checkpoint sometimes. But I love having idealism. I love being idealistic. It is a gift. It's something that I treasure so much. So I hear you, and I think it's an incredible hope feeder. And at the same time, as long as you're not, if it's not dipping your quality of life, that the idealized experience is not showing up, then I would say have at her. But when the idealized experience has not shown up in the material in the way you expected it, if you withhold your ability to feel enjoyment in your life because of that, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I think we can do ourselves a service by having our desires and our idealisms and then not holding them too tightly and not holding our expectations so tightly that we neglect the beauty and joy that's around us in our present moment. So, justice, fairness, right relations. So, I want to just preface that feeling to me is like a Doppler. It's like a ultrasound or a sonar. Feeling is this sensory experience that we get to, something hits our core and we get to tell where we are at in relation to that thing. It's our relative meter. It's our like, oh, this feels like this for me. And the closer I get to it, it starts to feel like this. And the farther I get to it from it, it feels like this. And when it comes from this angle, it feels like this. So to me, our feelings are our sonar. And we'll come back around to this by the end of this episode and I'll tie it all together. But it's kind of how things hit your walls, maybe. So maybe if it doesn't hit your core because you've got walls up, it hits your walls and tell you where you're at, like a sonar, right? And we're going to also talk about boundaries because, as I said, hitting your walls is sort of like boundaries, right? Boundaries are trending. And I'm not ignorant to think that boundaries have not always been a thing. Obviously, boundaries are part and parcel of the natural experience, like the boundary of our skin, the boundary of, the known world, the boundary of the ground when you're standing, the boundary of the bottom of a pool. Like boundaries are a thing. We have containers. Arguably, if you look at metaphysics, how solid the containers are is, dependent on the density of the material or the energy or the light. So boundaries are a thing. Boundaries are trending. We were learning about boundaries. And I will say that boundaries come in all kinds of forms. There's high value boundaries and low value boundaries. There's fast and easy boundaries. There's cheap and easy boundaries. There's fast action boundaries. There's solid anger, like no, not crossing a boundary. There's violent boundaries. There's passive aggressive boundaries. There is huge defensive walls. There's all kinds of ways of understanding boundaries. There's well-developed boundaries that you've invested in, refined, chiseled, and checked for breathability. And so just consider boundaries to be a fence. And I mean, you've probably heard this analogy so many times. The boundaries you build can eventually be the prison and the wall you exist behind. So that's why I say they can be checked for breathability. They can be invested in and refined. You can work at them. You don't have to just put a boundary up and cement it in place and clench your teeth and clench your hands and just and hope that you energize it and it stays. You can also check a boundary. And if the boundary is lifted for a moment because you're checking the viability of it or checking if it's necessary and you get hurt because that boundary is down for a second, that's okay too. That's okay too, because remember from last week, we were working with an open heart and we're working with compassion for self and others. So on this theme of boundaries, fairness, using our feelings as a sonar or a ultrasound to feel where we're at in relation to things and have them bounce off, we're going to talk about justice. And as I said earlier, not the gavel and judge kind of justice, but more the emotional feeling experience of feeling that there's rightness in the world or within yourself, that there's a just aspect to this experience. There's fairness, there's equity, there's equality, there's ease. And so I want to say that As you continue to develop and grow and understand yourself and gain self awareness and gain perspective, some places where you were looking for justice, you might relax into a higher level of grace, where you don't necessarily need to have the strict quota for justice, equality, equity, where you can offer a little grace. You might be thinking, what does that look like? And I would offer you, if a toddler stomped on your foot or ate some of your food without asking, is that the moment you're pulling justice? Like, is it fair? Do we get the same amount, right? Or equity? Well, I paid for it, so I should get more, or I need more, so therefore I should get more, right? There's all these concepts of justice, equality, and equity, and just like everything we talk about here, they're nuanced, and we get to massage them a little bit, and we get to move beyond some concepts that we thought we would be forever beholden to, or that we thought were perhaps absolute in our experience that aren't. So, is there parts of you when you think about justice and what's fair? Now, I'm hoping you go to the parts where you're triggered because that's where the gold is. And I'm hoping you consider the parts where you're like, well, this isn't fair and this is not just. And let's look at that a little bit. So, are there parts that you are defending or that you feel need defending? And if so, let's look at them. Let's look at those parts and why they need defending and what's there. Is there a need to teach someone how to be with you or how to treat you? Sometimes we need boundaries and we need justice because we want people to know this is how you treat me. This is how you don't treat me. Don't do that. Don't do this. Right? Is there a feverish need to set boundaries? Is it feverish? Is it tempered? Is it like, I need this boundary up now because if not, I'm not going to be safe? Is it like, for any Twilight fans, is it like Bella figuring out she can put that force field around people to defend her family against the chaos that is going to ensue, the bloodshed, the debauchery that can happen, right? Is the need for boundaries feverish, or do you feel more like, oh, we'll figure it out? I guess I'll figure the boundary out when it gets tested and then I'll know where I stand. Where on that spectrum do you fall in terms of boundaries? And some of them might fall in the, yeah, whatever. Like if my kid really wants this and then I have to be like, no, you know what, we're not going to do that, not tonight. You can assert a boundary there and it can be okay and it's relaxed and it's chill and it's easy and it's whatever. Are there other aspects in your life where the trigger or the pain or the thing feels very vulnerable? So you want the boundary like now and don't cross it, don't even approach it. I want 10 signs so that you don't even walk up to the boundary and touch the wall. Don't even touch the wall. There's a moat so you can't touch the wall or scale the wall or look over the wall or look in the cracks. Back, stay back. Or this specific person, 100 yards from my wall. You think my boundary is the wall around my castle. You think my boundary might be the moat with the alligators around my castle, but the boundary is actually where I've got my snipers in the forest ready to take you out before you get close. Like, what does your boundary look like and for what scenario? And how do you hold that? And so let's think about it. Because obviously, you're going to have different feelings of boundaries for different things, for different people, for different experiences. Are the things you just simply won't entertain? The boundary is it's not in my experience. I don't entertain it. It's not a thing for me. And these are all great practices. I'm not dogging them, but just are there boundaries that can be up for renewal? You can reevaluate. Are there boundaries that are keeping you from seeing what's on the other side or the potential? And you might be like, no, I'm feeling very safe with my boundary. I don't want to give it up. I don't want to question it. Please, I don't even want to entertain it. Or there might be places where the boundary is put in place because you love this thing so much and you're so attached to this thing that you put a boundary around it, and then it sort of blinds you to an even better thing, an even better experience. Because out of the goodness of the experience, we're putting a boundary up and holding on tightly. So similar to control, like we control because we don't want something to change, or we control because we don't want something unknown to come in, or we control because we like the thing exactly the way it is and we don't want it to shift. But change is always coming and boundaries are always shifting. So what about the thought of like, how will they know if I don't show them? How will they know how to treat me if I don't show them how to treat me? How will they know? I need to teach them. And I want to reflect on, can we control the receiving? Can we control whether they've respected our boundary or they have reverence for us as a person so they're willing to observe a boundary and respect it? Can we control if they're deeply listening to even understand the boundary we're trying to set? And so, control. Here's how it was undercover for me. I didn't realize I was controlling with boundaries. I didn't realize that my boundaries were a bit of a drain for me. Like I was extending beyond my boundaries sometimes into control. And sometimes when you've experienced being able to shift the emotions in a room because maybe you're feeling the emotions and it feels uncomfortable, and you've learned the art of shifting emotions. And maybe you've learned the art of shifting emotions without asking for permission first, because it either felt like it needed to happen because the emotions were overwhelming in the room, or whether it felt like it was easier to get the things that you needed in life if you shifted the energy, or whether it was for survival, whatever. If you learned how to shift the energies in the room or maneuver the experience, control, if you will, the dynamics that were happening. Like these are our incredible salespeople. In some cases, these are leaders that inspire. Like, I don't want to give the impression that control and energy shifting is completely harmful. Sometimes when we're being inspired by someone, they're shifting the energy. Now, the orbit or the like auric field or the field in which they're shifting the energy is something you can observe. So if they're just being them and they're being like Superman and they're doing the 4 minute mile, or they're doing some incredible feat, or they're skydiving, or they're giving this speech that rouses your heart, there's different levels of their interaction with you with that energy, right? So they can be inspiring because they can directly have a conversation with you and plant seeds of expansion and plant seeds of desire, plant seeds of like ideas that you weren't privy to. You can just watch someone and they're so inspiring in their field, in what they're doing. They might not even connect with you. They might not even be aware of your watching them, and they might be having an effect on you. So there's varying degrees in which we control and we affect one another. For me, as a teacher, I identify as a teacher because I'm always going back to teaching. I'm always motivated to teach. It's not worth my time unless it improves or is enjoyable or is nurturing. It's always up and always forward. So for me, it was always like, how do we get the better? Always the problem solving, always the what would be better than this? What's the problem? How do we fix it? How do we move beyond the problem? And then, interestingly enough, in my undergrad, I got very fixated on the problem and I stayed at like critical and problem level for a very long time. And I almost forgot to go back into problem solving. I just was, oh my God, overwhelmed by the problems, and particularly in political systems and politics and the overall, what is the hope that change can actually happen, and where would, oh my God, and if we wanted to affect change here, this is where that change is sort of stopped from happening over here, and like, is there even a potential to make actual real change? And ooh, that overwhelming thing happened. So part of me got a little bit frozen and freaked, and I didn't move back into problem solving for a little bit. But as a ignorant, I say ignorant with the most love, as a naive teen, problem solving was my specialty. No challenge was too big. My son exhibits similar, like whenever we put up oh no, we can't do this because of this. Oh, fair enough. How about we just do this? Like solutions on tap, solution. Like no, like hurdle, jump it. Like it's not a problem, mom. I've already figured out how I can still have the thing I want. So I had that same insatiability to crush problems like they were hurdles that were beneath my capacity. Like that they were like these small little hurdles. They were barely curbs for me. And as I continued to age in wisdom, I started to realize that, oh, some of these areas where I was like orchestrating and contorting my way, could have been given with a little more autonomy for the other person. So my understanding of boundaries and like, oh, but this person would love this experience anyway. They're going to love to sleep over and do this fun thing and then have pancakes in the morning. And I've got it all planned out and I've got their favorite music, whatever. All of the ways in which I was like, come on, let's just do the thing. Don't worry about the things you've got going on tomorrow. I've already got this incredible thing planned for us. Like I really did, you know, in many benevolent ways and probably in other ways that weren't so benevolent, I'm sure, as we all have experienced. But I started to learn how to maneuver situations, maneuver energy, um, rouse emotions, rouse people. And I like doing that when it's enjoyable, when it's nurturing, when it's up and up, when it's making improvements, when it's making their life enhanced for whatever reason. And I love that. And I love teaching. And I love when I can work with a concept and help somebody reach epiphany. Like epiphany is like intellectual orgasm. Like if I can help somebody get that epiphany and they feel freer afterwards, and it's like they're decongested, they can breathe through both nostrils. I'm like, holy smokes. For me, that's the analogy. Like brain, left and right brain syncs up, and in a moment they both become clear and you're unified in your thought for a second and you're like, holy smokes, I've just opened up a whole new layer of my thinking in my brain and I feel free. I feel malleable. I feel like my back's been cracked. I feel like I've got more space. I can do it. So for me, that's what I love. And I knew how to read people along the way to see if they were getting what I was putting down, if they were receiving it. Are you getting it? Are you getting it? Because I can feel and sense when an epiphany happens. Usually people tell you anyway, but you can see if they've got it. You can check for understanding. You can check for comprehension. And I check for comprehension energetically because it feels a certain way. And so when I was teaching, I was so locked in on that target. I would give 100 analogies if I had to. I would intuit where they could feel into it and deliver it. I could find where's that opening and just go right for it and give it. And it made me a very effective teacher. The students and I had wonderful relationships. They felt as though their opinions mattered. They felt as though they were learning in tandem with someone. They felt as though it mattered that they understood and got expansion, not that they memorized the material. What they wanted to learn, I was like, however the topic is that you're trying to wrap your head around, let's get there. Both of our minds on it, we're going to find the connection. And that felt so good for me. And I got so good at it. And then and then I forgot that that was a designated environment of teaching and learning. And sometimes in my personal life, when I'm trying to teach someone something and they're not necessarily wanting to learn the thing because they just want to do their life and they didn't sign up for being a student, of their mother. Obviously, this example in specific, I'm talking about my kids. But like it got to the point where if the interaction isn't teaching learning, I don't want it almost. Like I was just not transactional, but I knew about higher potential and I was just always going for it. Again, that Capricorn friggin' just keep climbing that steady mountain, keep going, hit it home, figure it out. So I was controlling to a degree, or I was over investing in the reception. And when somebody is equally invested, then it feels like you're making magic. But when someone is not receiving those seeds you're attempting to plant, they're not going to take. And and at some point they're probably going to feel like, "Hey, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like a two-way relationship. It feels like you're constantly trying to expect things out of me, or like it's not always a teachable moment. It's just sit with me and put your arm around me, mom." So, again, I had to come to terms with some of this, right? And realize that nurturing and teaching can be similar, but they can also be different. And if I want to share and teach or show, and I want to make it as clear as possible, and I want to take the upward progress, and I want to, get the biggest net return on that gold. I want to make the biggest investment and get the most gold. The other person has to be on board with it and they have to be willing. And I started to look at that investment understanding, and I started to realize, well, I don't want to invest. I don't want to invest unless the other person's investing. And that before was not really something I always took into consideration. When I was teaching at the college, it was just a given. And that was easy to check because that's what the transaction was. When I was corporate trainer with different organizations that would hire me to train them on things, again, that was the transaction that was happening. So it was very easy. But taking that tone in other relationships started to demonstrate to me, okay, there's some boundary here that could be crossed in a way that's sort of selfish by my end. So looking into that was very helpful, and started to look at my own investing versus divesting. And am I investing in this? Or I want to start divesting from this. This is not something I'm interested in backing out, right? But two invested individuals is like triple cherry for me on the slot machine. Like ding, ding, ding. We're both invested. Let's do it. I love that. That's just, I've come to realize that's my life's pride and joy. That's my life's excitement. I think about that Kris Kardashian song for her birthday when I say that, pride and joy. I think she says joy and pride though. She says it in the opposite way. But anyway, that's like my triple cherry on the slot machine. When like two people make an epiphany or two people get together and solve a problem, I'm like, oh, does it get any better than this? How does it get any better than this? And not even problem solving, but problem solving for solution finding, more oriented towards the solution finding, more oriented towards this walking up the hill. So me invested, them not, I start to feel like I want to pull my investment. And okay, like not harshly, not right away, not hasty, because I've been in that situation too where I'm like, oh, okay, people aren't listening, fine. People don't value what I have to say, fine. Back it up. And I've also been in a place where it's been like, oh, yes, this isn't the role, okay. But also, I've come to see where overinvestment can feel like self-sacrificing on the back end. And this is where I said in the last episode where shadow could be hiding behind the light, trying to offer value to get valued, to get validation, trying to solve a problem at the expense of someone's sovereignty or someone else's permission. So it's a fine line to walk, right? And not only that, if you feel like you're self-sacrificing because you're inputting and you're investing and you're attempting to meet someone beyond where they're at or walk more than your share of steps, or meet someone beyond 50% there, and they don't know how to meet you, or they didn't ask for it, they didn't want to, it starts to feel like self-sacrifice. And that's good that it does, because then you start to pay attention to a boundary. So this is both for having a boundary and crossing a boundary, even if you think when you cross a boundary, it's benevolent, right? Because if we're looking at boundaries, chances are we're not only ever learning how to put up a boundary, we're also learning how to not cross boundaries, right? We're not, perfect individuals who are just, again, I think I said this last episode, but only the victim, never the villain. That's not the case. It's not the case. We're learning the coin. We're learning both sides of it. So understanding when we're feeling like we're self-sacrificing, there's probably going to be a residue of resentment. So we should be looking at investment from that perspective as well. I don't want to feel resentment attached to my investment. So therefore, I'm not going to invest to the level of resentment, which means I will not push beyond that self-sacrificing, and I'll always be present and aware of the investment I'm making while I'm making it. Which is why, ta-da, it helps for you to feel in the dark. It helps for you to feel that ultrasound, feel where you're hitting against. Like, have I hit a wall? Have I come too far? Have I gone beyond my bounds? Have I pushed beyond my bounds? And it's good. The information isn't like, oh shit, I didn't do it right. I didn't do it perfect. Oh, this feels yucky, so therefore I've done something wrong. This is like liberating when you start to realize you can do this work, and it doesn't have to mean that anything's wrong. It doesn't have to mean that where you're at is not far enough. And I know we know this. We hear this and we're like, well, yeah, obviously where you're at is perfect, or obviously it's okay to be where you're at. But some of us hear that. Some of us perfectionists hear that and be like, yeah, yeah, where you're at is great, but it'd be a whole lot better if you were perfect. Or where I am is great, but you know what? I'd like to be here. I'd like to be at the front. I'd like to be ahead. I'd like to be in a place that feels great more of the time, or feels the best all of the time. Or I don't want none of that. I want to be done being like a newbie. I want to be done being figuring it out. I want to have figured it out. And so it's good to have reflection and actually feel that it is okay to be where you're at, because those senses are helping us feel where we are at. They're helping us with self-awareness. And if we condemn the information they're bringing forward, then it's going to be really hard to keep looking at the information and not feel like crap about it. So having those senses help you feel where you are in terms of boundaries, feel where you are in terms of whether you're passing your own boundaries, whether you're stepping into a field of like creating an injustice for someone else because now you've pressed or trespassed into their boundaries, is helpful. And it helps you feel in the dark and in the scenario. It's a helpful sense. So, given that we're talking about justice and we're talking about boundaries and feeling a sense of justice, what sparked all this for me was like, I was in a particularly expanded state. I was feeling really good. And I was like, I don't necessarily need justice. I actually can exist in grace. I can exist. I like the feeling of grace. I can exist in grace. I don't need justice. And then it was like, well, yeah, that's a very big thing to say, and that's beautiful of you. But there are some times where you do feel like things are unjust and you feel a little bit slighted and you do have a feeling towards it. So it's nice that you have that ideal. That's beautiful. Keep reaching for it. And also don't be mad at yourself when you have, or other people, when you have an experience of not feeling justice. Because again, we're all here playing the game of life with the tools we have, entering into relationships with one another. And when we keep expecting perfection or bust, perfection or cancel, perfection or ghost, relationships feel like minefields and battlegrounds. And what I'm noticing lately, I've spent a little bit more time on social media. Just every once in a while, I go through a binge and like call it research. And I just noticed that it seems like relationships are almost places where we could PTSD ourselves out of relationship. And Lord knows it'd be easy because we have so much social media exposure. So we could live our lives feeling as though we're relating to one another and somewhat relating to one another over social media, but not actually having a messy in person interaction. So I want to caution us into the ease of having easy turn off, turn on, turn on, turn off relationships through social media, and not having any in person, messy, rich, enjoyable, confusing, frustrating relationships. And I say this because as I started with this whole like, oh, I want to invest and this is the way I want to invest, otherwise I want to divest. Relationships, I think, because I have such a goal driven, high standard, idealistic outlook, the trap of that could be to fall into this idealized version of relationships and have them become transactional based on how elevated the experience is for me. And I'm not knocking confidence, like having confidence and having relationships that feel good to you, that are nurturing to you, is absolutely a worthy pursuit. But when you get to the point where like, social interactions annoy the crap out of me. I just can't. I won't. Like when we get to those levels of like social anxiety is now just my generalized anxiety. I dealt with a lot of my shadow stuff and now it's just like I have social anxiety and that seems regular and that's okay. And it is. It is regular because a lot of us are going through it. But is it something that could be a potential hindrance for us to experience expansion and growth and enjoyment and the richness of relationships? Quite possibly. So we could be writing off relationships that don't have a transactional value, that don't feel like they hit our gold standard. And I think intimate relationships, we got to have grace for. And I think acquaintance type relationships, there's not too much on the line. So sometimes if people bother us when we're out and about, it's easy to get over it. It's not a big deal. It's not personal. It's just stuff bumping up against stuff. And so this is why, for me, this all relates to boundaries, because how are you going out into the world? How are you feeling boundaried, but in a breathable way so that it's not it's not re-traumatizing you or triggering you and being like, oh, I can't even do social situations anymore. I can't really do relationships anymore, versus I'm free to do relationships. I'm resilient. I know what my goals are. I know what my aims are. I can maneuver my way through relationships and experiences. Nothing is really that big, and life feels like a fun game for me to play, even when it feels like I've forgotten it's a game and I'm really stuck in it and I feel like things are crazy. So, how do you maintain both those perspectives? How do you maintain boundaries that are permeable? How do you understand justice in a way that's like not feeding your victim or not baiting your victim? And also believing that justice in the world is a necessary thing. Because I've mentioned this before, I believe we are self-regulating individuals. I believe we are entitled to sovereignty and self-regulation, but while we are still hurting people so prolifically, obviously we need to continue holding the standards of justice until every one of us has innately and intuitively understood what that means. And we don't necessarily need a law to tell us not to hurt, harm, kill, steal. When we don't need laws to tell us how to behave, I think we'll be in a lot different experiences. And I believe we're going to get there. I idealize and know within every part of my being, we have the capacity to have that human experience. So, partly why I do this stuff. Partly that's why for the love of humanity, that's my ideal. So my goal in relationships, in boundaries and injustice and all of that is upward, better, nurturing, new. And I noticed that it's funny as I'm like talking about it and recording it, writing it down, I'm like, upward. Okay, that's my Capricorn sun. Obviously upward, upward, upward. But it's also conjunct Lilith, so I've got to watch that injustice part. But that's also what makes me so passionate about justice and people feeling heard, seen, and I realize, like, okay, so if I can't just go be a tiger mom for every person that I feel has been wronged or hurt, what can I do? Oh, I can teach them that they're worthy as they are, no matter what anybody says. They're powerful as they are, no matter what they've been told or shown. That they have the divine birthright to navigate, create, and choose their life and perspective. That regardless of the circumstances they were born into, nobody can tell them they can't find a way around, above, or beyond it. They are entitled to figuring that out. So those are the things that I value so much. And I realize that if I can help people with that, if I can show people their grandness, if I can remind people of their right to be and their sovereignty over themselves, and that they do have something that can guide them even when they're inundated with information, that they know there's a truth meter inside them that they might have forgotten, or there's an inherent goodness inside them, and that no matter what, like Kurt Vonnegut, there's a poem that I will forever love, and he ends it with that the world is actually a kind and loving place. Like, there's so many, no matter what people tell you, there's so many things that demonstrate otherwise, but we still get the right to believe that it's different. And when we believe and know that it's different, we get to see that it's different. So my goal is the upward, the better, right? That's the better, the free. And that's my moon and Jupiter in Sagittarius. Like, they're conjunct. Moon and Jupiter are conjunct in Sagittarius. That's the better, the free, the expansive, the free, loving mama. And then the sun and Capricorn, that's that upward, going, grinding, liberating, like. And then I have this ascendant north node in Cancer, which is like the nurturing. And my Venus, Mercury, and Mars are in Aquarius. So that's like all the new, 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 new. So like, this to me is what my relational love language is. I want those things. And sometimes I get really fixated on them. So in relationships that I'm not experiencing that level of like fireworks, I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Is it time to divest? A real treat sometimes. So sometimes I feel like I'm taking on more when the message was not received, or when comprehension was not had, or when change for the better has not happened. I assume that there's a level of willful disrespect or dishonor or non-reverence. I feel like, oh, what does this mean for me? And really what it means for me is like, my bad, spillover. I was trying to control beyond what I was meant to. I can offer my offerings and then I can back up. I can offer my offerings and then I can release. I don't control the reception. I don't control whether it's respected. I don't control whether it's honored. My bad. Pull that back. Or just my bad. Doesn't even need to be pulled back. But I get to decide then what I do beyond that. I get to decide then how much more investment do I make. I get to decide if I divest from that situation. So sometimes I would be resentful for my overflow because I was holding tight to an outcome. I was overly invested without neutrality. I was in expectation. And I've talked about this before. One of my gene keys is moving from expectation to detachment to celebration. This is one of the major ones in my profile, human design and gene keys. So one of my lessons that I'm meant to go over and over again, hello, control connects up, right? Is to move from expectation, graspiness, grasping, holding too tightly, even desperation, which I would say is below. Like expectation is the shadow, detachment is the gift, celebration is the exalted citic state. So, and like graspiness, desperation would be like sub shadow, I feel like. So when I realize I'm in expectation, I get to take a moment and say, oh, okay, I got to detach here. I got to celebrate that I've presented something wonderful, in my opinion, and I've done what I meant to do. I don't have to go in and attempt to contrive or control a situation of learning where the person is not interested. And it would be very righteous, self-righteous of me to think that what I'm offering is obviously solid gold material for them. And hello, why aren't you accepting it? Right? There's a whole other experience around that. But that only comes up if I'm not necessarily using my feeling sense, my sonar to feel the reception ahead of time. That's usually coming as a feeling of overinvestment. So in those scenarios, I was meeting more than halfway and I was giving less than 100%. And what I mean by that was I was attempting to control the receivership of it. I was walking beyond my halfway and I was still walking and like, hey, can't you see that this is great? As opposed to being in alignment. My 100% would mean I'm doing 100% of what I think is great. Meaning I've cared for myself enough to be in integrity enough to not overgive, to check when I am overgiving, because you can't charge someone for a meal you decided to just bring to their door out of nowhere. Like, here it is, and where's my money? Like, what? I never ordered this. What do you mean? So, understanding when we go beyond a boundary, when we've not perceived a boundary, even if it's our own boundary that tells us, you know better, don't overinvest here. And it's not to punish someone. It's to ensure that you're in check, you're in clarity, you're not harboring any resentment. And so for me, I want to make sure I'm meeting halfway. That's the justice part of it. But I'm 100% in integrity. And it's okay if I'm not, but also recognizing like this is mine then when I feel resentment and I've given from spillover, not from overflow. So overflow is like I have so much, it's just radiating out of me. People who are around can pick up on it, enjoy the energy, whatever. Spillover is like I've spilled over into their area and now I have an expectation. That's how I see it. I mean, you can look at it any which way, but that helps me understand the nuance, because energetics and feelings, it's really hard to categorize and put in these containers and have a label and say it's always going to feel like this and it's always going to look like this. And for you, it's going to feel like this. And for me, it's going to feel the exact same way. I've developed my edges and my fine lines so that I understand when I'm tipping into an area that went from what was one thing and is now sort of transformed into a different thing. So with boundaries, you can show and share, but release expectations of receptivity, release grasping. Show and share, release, like you can give the food, but you don't need to put the food on the spoon and now jam it in somebody's mouth, right? So for me, injustice is about being like stuck and forced. So if that's the case, then if I'm attempting to force someone's receptivity, then now I've tipped over from justice and now I'm being unjust with someone. And like, think about even manipulation and what that looks like, coercion, seduction, right? These are all kind of words that talk about walking a line. We want to work with someone to open them up, to have them feel open, given they've consented to this experience. And consent can look different. Somebody can show up in a learning environment and be consenting to learn, but they might not be consenting to have their trauma dragged up during that learning experience, but they might want to say, hey, I want to look at this thing. This thing's being brought up for me when you say this. So it's always a very present, responsible experience when we look at boundaries. It's not like we set it and forget it. It's being very aware of where the line is, because boundaries aren't necessarily solid and they're not necessarily material, especially when we get into the realm of relationships. So we have to be present for those boundaries while they're there. You could say, I just don't like it when people touch me here. So set it and forget it. Don't touch me here. Okay. But there are other ways in which we have to be responsible for our boundaries. We have to be aware and awake and working with them and playing with them. And that's where it sort of gets fun again. Because think of a game of tennis if you just stayed in one spot and you weren't really moving around. Think of how fun tennis would be if the net started moving. Geez. So when I see injustice is when people are stuck or forced against their will. So I want to see my options from beyond. And I realize there are other moves to make. So when I think I'm stuck, I want to know that I get to see beyond. I get to see my options, that I have choice, and that I may have to come to like a disappointment or a redefinition or a dissolving or a divestment, but the choices are always there. The choices are for me to move beyond a boundary. There's choice for me to create my own boundary. There's choice even when I feel as though I'm stuck and somebody else has a choice over me. There's still another choice for perspective, for maneuvering. That doesn't necessarily come until I'm relaxed, until I'm seeing from that bigger perspective. And then I can look at redefining, dissolving, divesting. I can't assume that my divestment pain is unjust either. So if I've decided to divest from something because I've evaluated it and it's like, okay, well, this just doesn't feel right for me anymore, there could have pain associated with my divestment, like leaving a relationship, walking away from a relationship, changing the terms of the frequency of the relationship, changing the way in which the interactions happen in the relationship. That might come with pain. But that's my trigger, my pain, my expectation, my human error. Not human error in the sense like I've wronged, not because I'm wrong or I'm defective, but because I signed up for an experience where I enter into life and relation with the tools of feeling and thinking and thought, and with this recording system of a brain or of a mind that sets up a scaffolding for my beliefs, right? Which is just my long-term thoughts and feelings. It's the storage of that, right? So I have this system. I've come into life with these thoughts, feelings, apparatuses that help me navigate. And I've come into this life to have experiences and relationships. And I've got these tools And I've got this long-term storage system that can offer me shortcuts or quick cuts or frameworks to keep experiencing. And this is great because I can experience at higher levels. I can experience refinement. I can experience mastery. I can experience the intricacies of life. These systems help, but sometimes these systems are sort of junked up with old belief systems or old thoughts or traumas or triggers or boundaries that were needed at one time that are now keeping us boundaried up. So I came here to have this experience. And just because sometimes the experience hurts or I didn't see all of the peripheral, I didn't see everything, I made a human error. And it's not that I made a human error, it's that my human capacity up till this experience was limited and I didn't see the things I didn't see. And I'm not wrong for not seeing the things I didn't see. And beyond this experience, I have more knowledge than I had before. So there's no wrong. There's no inherent wrong. There's no wrong in being human. There's no wrong in the limitations that come with being human. It's not a problem. It's only a problem if we've decided it's a problem. It's all experience. And when we can detach to that level, we can have enjoyable experiences. Our boundaries don't need to be hotly contested or hotly defended. They can be permeable ways in which we bump up against one another and give latitude and space for figuring it out. And some will not feel like that. Some boundaries will feel very, very real and hard and fast. And so the good news is we're always getting to edit and refine our framework of how we see justice, what is just, what is boundaries. And we get to do this in response to thoughts and feelings about our experiences. And we get to make new choices, better choices, choices that feel better, choices that feel like maybe a pinch or even a stretch. I like to look at it like that, like a dilation in the short term, but they set us up to experience something better next. So sometimes you might go through a short-term pinch, and that's like the compounding, contracting slingshot moment. So you're contracting, 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 and poof, then you get to bust out. Then you get to have an epiphany. Think about even in intercourse, in like your sexual interactions. Think about the buildup of an orgasm. It's the same. We're contracting, contracting, tightening, in and out, like in and out. Did not mean that. What I'm the synergy of contracting, releasing, contracting, releasing, contracting, releasing, like that buildup creates something incredible. So in the short term, we might be experiencing a pinch or a contraction that leads to the feeling of a free fall expansion or the feeling of freedom, right? We might experience a stretch that really does feel like, oh, this is really stretching me. But after the stretch, we might relax into, wow, okay, I feel like there's more room for me to live and be, and like that after feeling, right? The afterglow. So to err is human, to forgive is divine, to remain open and have an open heart is grace, is to remain in grace. And so for me, I like to feel justice to the tone of grace when I can. When I can reach that note, that's how I like to feel justice. I like to feel justice with some spaciousness, some graciousness, some detachment, some peace. And I also understand that in the world right now, justice is a virtue that still needs to be upheld, respected. And we all come to realizations of what justice feels like. And we might have some blind spots, even if we think we figured it out. But the more we understand justice for ourselves, the less likely we need to be policed around what justice looks like in the external. Like, it's interesting because I have children and they fight in two different styles. I have two boys, and one still thinks like it's doesn't understand that like hands-on being physical is like it's not necessary. And the other one uses like more emotional warfare, more like strategic warfare. So it's a very interesting combination, and neither one of them knows how to hold that justice line when they start getting into situations that are boundary crossing for either of them. And it's such an interesting metaphor for our societies and where we're at, generally speaking. Do we still have to remind one another, hands off, respect boundaries, get consent, but we also don't want to throw out the whole experience of relationships because it's hard and because it hurts and because it's easier to just divest and have transactional relationships. Like, let's just have a transactional relationship, but I only get what I want. I don't give beyond what I don't want. And those are great tenets at the same time, but think about how quickly that can become cold, sterile, and the expectation is so rigid that we're not actually living rich experiences. It's okay to bump up against things that don't feel good sometimes in exchange for having real, living, on the fly relationships. So I'll leave you with the thought of your own boundaries, your own sense of justice, and maybe reaching for that hand, that higher perspective, that higher self, and just breathing so deeply that you can dilate and expand and see where some of the areas that feel hotly contested or unjust, you can relax a little and be like, yeah, life's real interesting. Isn't that interesting that I've experienced that? And then the grand scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal. And I wouldn't forfeit the relationship or relationships in general for a life of sterile convenience and living behind my own castle walls. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate that you listen. And if you've listened all the way through, I love you. Thank you so much. I am at Femist at Instagram. Reach out if you have any questions or requests for topics. Thank you and have a good day.